Hello and welcome to our weekly program Global Review, in which we present to you more analyzed and more robust analysis of global developments across the week. Let's first have a look at the headlines. UK-Russia crisis deepens as they suspend spies from each other's countries and deepen the crisis further. Philippines to withdraw from International Criminal Court. Saudi Arabian prince works on his image, reaches United States. Jacob Zuma to be prosecuted in South Africa. Protest over slain councilwomen in Brazil brings in more protests all across Brazil. The crisis between Bolivia and Chile brings in greater challenges as Chile reaches the International Criminal Court. The world loses star scientist Stephen Hawking passes away at 76. Welcome back, friends. Today we would discuss in our section Across the Globe some of these stories which are extremely important in terms of how world is moving ahead. Brexit is one such important event of this century. Let's have a look at this report. Let's have a look at this important report which is prepared by our team.
UK has reached a joint legal agreement with the European Union on the legal terms of a Brexit transition deal. The move is seen as a milestone development in the difficult negotiations to depart Britain from the bloc. The two negotiators, Michel Barnier, the EU's chief negotiator, and David Davis, the UK's Brexit secretary, announced about the agreement at joint news conference in Brussels. Both agreed that the deal on what the UK calls the implementation period was a decisive step.
Both sides remain committed to December's joint report in all its aspects. All. 2. We have agreed that the issues identified in the EU text must be addressed for finding a viable and legally sound solution. 3. In particular, we agreed today that a backstop solution must form part of the legal text of the withdrawal agreement.
We've made rapid progress across the wider withdrawal agreement, reaching agreement on much of the legal text and locking down entire chapters on citizens' rights and the financial settlement. Most importantly, this means that, just as we're giving certainty to businesses, we're also providing the same for citizens.
The transitional period is of 21 months and set to end in December 2020. Under the time period, UK would provide for the free movement of goods, services, capital and people until the end of the period. UK is to abide by all existing EU rules but without any decision-making powers. But Britain possesses consultation rights over fishing quota set in 2020, which guarantees that EU would not reduce UK's share of the total catch. But issues still to be resolved, including the Northern Ireland border. Theresa May also insisted that no British Prime Minister could sign up to a text including a proposition that could threaten the constitutional integrity of the United Kingdom by creating a customs and regulatory border down the Irish Sea. Also, the two sides reached a comprehensive agreement on a financial statement and the rights of around 4 million citizens affected by the Brexit.
So with these challenges, what are the options that the world community should look forward for? What are the imperatives for India? How the internal politics within UK is deepening the crisis, and in what way EU is trying to extract whatever it can. Today, to discuss these issues, we have Sreeram Chaulia with us and former Commerce Secretary Mr. Rajiv Kher. Welcome. Sreeram, as we were discussing, the issues are in terms of how the deepening challenge within UK's own politics is having imperatives in terms of what UK should agree with. The Prime Minister is emphasizing in terms of the fact that the constitutional integrity should be protected by any means. And from that point of view, the economic loss, the fact that Unilever has already shifted out of UK, there are many more firms which are going, several of the banks have indicated to shift out. How you see this as a major sort of challenge for Britain and gain for EU, if at all?
That's right, Sachinji. I think Theresa May is caught between the devil and the deep sea. In international relations, we call these two-level games. First, you have to negotiate at home among all your stakeholders, form a position and call it your national interest, and then go negotiate with the outside party, which is the European Union. But Theresa May is unable to get her own house in order. There is a whole bunch of Tory lawmakers and the grassroots voters who went for Brexit in the referendum, who want a complete hard Brexit without anything to do with the EU once and for all. On the other hand, there is a softer faction within the Conservative Party which is saying, if we do hard Brexit, we are going to lose access to the common market. It's going to be a huge blow to our businesses. Already, as you said, some major companies are relocating away from Britain to continental Europe, and the economic losses will just pile up and will be create a disaster. So they are urging that Britain should give more concessions in order to hold on to some. So this is the tussle that's going on. She's not able to manage this contradiction. Therefore, she is weak. She has made a lot of concessions.
And there, Sreeram, we are also seeing UK scaling up the linkages like the Commonwealth. So
they have to look for alternatives.
Yes,
she's calling it. Theresa May calls it global Britain, an attempt to look beyond the EU for new agreements and new partnerships. But frankly, the dependence of the UK economy, especially the financial sector, is so great on the continental Europe that they will suffer losses, as you said. And this transition agreement that's just been signed is simply a way to assuage the fears of a lot of businesses, and to give them some certainty. They're saying, okay, Brexit is now anyway happening on March 2019, but after that we'll get to 21-month period in which some of the old rules and regimen will continue, so that you can gradually make the transition rather than a sudden cliff edge, as they say. But frankly, Britain has to give away too many concessions.
Exactly, and there I think it would be also important to see what imperatives India would have and what kind of challenges Indian policymakers would have. Mr. Khair, you have led Commerce Ministry for several years. How you look at sort of implications for India, what kind of policy choices we have? We are also part of Commonwealth. So what kind of options we have?
Well, I think the first issue which will confront India would relate to the India-EU trade engagement. And the fact that UK is a very important trading partner. And also the fact that a large part of services related exports from India happen to to UK. Now what is going to happen is that with EU sans UK clearly is going to change the potential export basket for India, and that is going to alter in a significant manner the present understanding between the two groups, between India and EU. Now clearly we'll have to see to what extent, because in services we were getting a lot out of the fact that UK is the major trading partner within EU. Now with UK having gone, we will have to reposition ourselves in order to get greater market openings in the area of services. And same will be related to, for example, issues relating to data security. Now data security is an area where we are extremely eager and aggressive, and we'll have to see how we can take advantage of this new situation.
There was a proposal to have India-UK FTA, and the fact that UK is extremely keen to evolve some business arrangement to ensure and give sense of confidence to our companies who are already based in London. How you look at that? Would private sector get some sort of assurance, or they are looking forward for some kind of concession by UK government?
Well, talking of an India-UK agreement may be too premature in time, because as Sreeram mentioned just now, that this whole process of UK's exclusion out of EU is going to take a substantial amount of time, and until that happens, there is no point in thinking about an India-UK agreement. But yes, in the meanwhile, obviously there will be repositioning between the two countries, India and UK, of the various strengths and weaknesses that they have.
Yeah, it would also be important, Sreeram, to see how in the global Britain that you referred to, where India fits in. And as I was mentioning, next month when we meet in London for Commonwealth Summit, there are efforts by UK government to have more and more participation of small island countries, bring in key African partners and try to see if there is attraction. So what we see from side of Britain is a two-track approach. As they dissociate with the EU, they want to at the same time strengthen their sort of colonial ties and bring in sense of assurance, partnership, evolving value chains and many other economic areas. Do you see some sort of scope that India can leverage at this point, both with EU, as in last episode we discussed Macron's visit and EU's interest in connecting with India, and UK's desire to continue same level of participation?
Yeah, Sachin, I think the basic point is that, in any negotiation we should know the vulnerabilities of the other side, even if it's a deeper cooperation, to be able to extract our pound of flesh, so to say. And I think Britain is desperate in that sense because it has been weakened significantly by the Brexit, the whole messy, divorce that is going on right now. And Britain has made significant concessions. I mean, Theresa May started by saying we will not pay a divorce bill of more than 18 billion pounds to the EU. She finally agreed on 40 billion pounds. She said, we will not accept European Court of Justice jurisdiction on us. She had to accept until this transition period is over. She said, we will not accept the EU fishing quotas. She's had to concede on that. So at every level, as her critics are saying, within her own party and outside, in the right wing in Britain, appeasement, as they are saying, has become the byword for Theresa May. She's only hanging on through appeasement. That's the criticism of what she's doing. So in that sense, if she has to appease
But what are the compulsions? Because is there some gain for Britain by agreeing to that? As in her statement in the Parliament, she was quite emphatic in terms of UK getting what is required and desired by people.
Well, so beggars can't be choosers, Sajjanji. Right now, they have to be realistic and make concessions. And that's where I'm coming to India. I feel like, whatever bilateral issues we have, be it in the security realm, be it in trade, be it in the Commonwealth also, of course, we've had a historic linkage and that will never go away. But I think right now is a time to drive a harder bargain on certain issues. So therefore, we have to look at item-wise,
and we would have to identify what the
we are the third largest
future options
we are the third largest investor in the UK.
Good. With
and
this,
therefore, we need to talk more about how that can be leveraged.
Exactly. So with this, we come to end of this section. We would come back to analysis with Beyond the News. Welcome back to this section. Here we bring in details of some stories where we go beyond the headlines. It's beyond the news. Today we look into the WTO ministerial. Let's have a look at this report.
Global economic growth and international trade are passing through a particularly challenging phase of uncertainty. In this context, open, inclusive and mutually beneficial trade can provide an impetus to economic growth and lead to prosperity. At the recently concluded 11th WTO Ministerial Conference in Buenos Aires, WTO members were unable to reach a consensus on how to take the agenda of negotiations in key areas forward. It is with the objective of revitalizing discussion in the WTO that India organized an informal WTO ministers gathering of 50 WTO members on 19th and 20th March 2018 in New Delhi. The objective of the ministerial meeting was to facilitate an informal and frank exchange of views on the agenda for negotiations at the WTO, as well as institutional issues and any other theme of common interest to the membership. This is the second WTO mini-ministerial meeting being hosted by India after the first in 2009.
The WTO has become even more important, has always been important, but now has become even more important, considering the recent trends that we are witnessing in which countries are trying to unilaterally take certain actions which in long term will harm everybody. And therefore we must ensure that we keep the global trade growing, which benefits all the countries.
We heard today many countries saying we have a concern with this, there is a potential for escalation, we have to proceed very carefully and try to work within the framework of the WTO.
This is the continuation of Prime Minister Modi's push for a greater Indian role on the global platform and showcase India as a country of solution provider which takes proactive steps to break the institutional and governance impasse. Bone of contention at Buenos Aires and topics of discussion at mini-ministerial in Delhi were in the issues related to agriculture, investment facilitation, e-commerce, MSME and gender, institutional issues and role of WTO Secretariat, development related to differentiation and differential treatment and discussions toward maintaining an overall balance for WTO.
Welcome. I think this WTO ministerial which India hosted has succeeded in terms of highlighting some of the concerns that India has. Around 51 countries participated. The key issues in terms of centrality of multilateralism, for which India has stood all these years, got re-emphasized. Idea is also in terms of bringing in more respect for Doha development agenda, idea to retain spatial and differential treatment, and some flexibility, maybe starting with e-commerce. Some of these issues we would be discussing with Mr. Rajiv K today. So how you look at some of the developments, probably the flexibility that India has indicated, does that communicate any message, any change in our position, or as is interpreted by media today, some flexibility?
See, I think the biggest, the best that this ministerial has done is helping India in evolving its position on a few areas where we thought that in Buenos Aires we were not exactly, we did not come exactly as we should have. And e-commerce was one such area. Now, clearly by simply resolving that we would be prepared to discuss in an exploratory phase a potential possibility of an agreement on e-commerce is definitely not getting into negotiations. But it clearly opens a door for India to participate in an exercise which will be a learning and an educative exercise for India itself, because we are ourselves at the moment groping in dark. The technology and law and economics are enmeshed so closely in the whole dimension of e-commerce, including the governance and financial management aspects, security aspects. So therefore, I would say that this is a welcome move. Besides, of course, the time when the minister convened this meeting, we were not very sure as to what exactly this meeting would achieve. But thankfully, over the last, well, in a paradoxical sense, in the last month or so, the manner in which international trade related developments have taken place, whether they are import tariffs or whether what is happening on the issue of appellate body in the WTO, somehow this congregation got an objective to achieve. And I think to that extent, this ministerial has been quite useful, because it got together a set of ministers from countries, important countries in international trade, and they were able to at least agree on things which were considered as common danger, as common threat. And to that extent, the ministerial has achieved an objective.
The ministerial that we were expecting also to get us some solution for the appellate tribunal. The deputy USTR was here. But I would come back to you on that issue. Let me ask Sreeram, the emphasis by the Prime Minister in terms of India not being a naysayer all the time and provide global solution. How, Sreeram, you see this role of Modi administration in last few years? We saw India's pragmatic approach to Addis Ababa action agenda in effort to raise more resources and bringing OECD and developing countries closer. Then you find SDG of full-fledged support by the Prime Minister. and then climate change and Paris Agreement. Here, salvaging the round that we were grappling with in the post-Doha at WTO, and now again a new sort of position by India in terms of WTO negotiations. So where you see the new political choices and probably with strategic implications?
No, definitely, Sachin, because Buenos Aires, we were blamed by the US, saying that food stockpiling, we are not making any progress on this, and we are the ones blocking. And in a way, this is a reprisal of the old criticism that India is the obstructor. So I think it was very important we did this mini ministerial to show that we want to take the process forward, and it's a proactive move, although it's an informal ministerial. And I think the bull in the China shop really for us to grapple at the strategic level is the US attitude, because that has become very, very negative to multilateral negotiations and trade in general. As Rajiv is mentioning, they are gunning for the appellate process itself. They don't want this whole rules-based and judicial and legalized way, because Trump wants to do one-on-one based on give and take in a different manner, and they believe they have always historically wanted to go back to the GATT system, rather than a rules-based one, which is WTO. So they are trying to undermine the whole system. And what PM is saying, our PM is saying, is we still believe in a rules-based multilateral system and a genuine one, and that's I think the central point.
But the challenge really is, how do you convince all other
and how to get the Americans on board? You see, that's critical, because they have become so obstructive when it comes to deficits and these kind of things, and very narrow. See, at one point Trump has gone on record saying that we don't have a majority of judges in the WTO, and all the decisions in the WTO dispute settlement are against us and we are losing, which is not true. Statistically, I looked it up, 91% of the complaints filed by the United States in WTO dispute settlement have gone in favor of United States.
There are several issues, Sreeram, on which precedent is hardly backed by statistical or empirical evidence, whatever you count on.
So we need to, I think, come around with other groups. Like, for example, it is being said at the ministerial that Japan, South Korea, Brazil and India found common ground on on the tariffs and these kind of things. So I think we obviously don't want to upset the relationship with the US too much, because 60% of our software exports go to the US. And so somehow we have to work out a measure which is not completely taking the US out of the picture, but at the same time defending our interests.
Yeah. One more important issue, Mr. K, is in terms of India's emphasis on spatial and differential treatment for developing countries, which US is not accepting. How you look at that with TPP, though coming up in a very diluted form, do you see this going further?
See, the biggest danger today is the effort by some developed countries to find an alternative for special and differential, or rather to completely divide the developing country group into two. One which could be amenable to the special and differential treatment, the other would not be, the so-called advanced economies and developing economies. Now, clearly at this moment it is going to be extremely dangerous for India, because if agreement after agreement amongst the covered agreements, you have provisions which somehow protect a very genuine and a very legitimate provision which supports developing countries' development programs.
Yep.
And therefore, there is every reason for us to maintain that position. I was reading in the morning newspapers that there was this issue brought up in special and differential, and there was a large number of ministers and officials from other countries who supported a certain amount of tweaking with the special and differential. Now, I don't know what exactly is the position in the ministerial, but I would strongly believe that India should not take any initiative in order to try and get a certain kind of a categoric statement or a mention on the continued coverage of India and such other countries under the special and differential, because that is there.
Yeah.
That is very much there. So why should we unnecessarily go out and take the bull by the horn?
And after special and differential treatment, the other important element of WTO, which is sort of, as Sreeram was mentioning, is the WTO dispute settlement system, where several developing countries have a lot of hope. In fact, if we say that that's the only system where everybody is moving along probably is the DSP. So from that point of view, we thought that it would be pertinent for us to see this in little detail, and our book that we are covering up in the next section brings in some of the key elements of this. In the WTO ministerial in Delhi, we wanted United States to take a position, as a statement by the Secretary, by the Director General yesterday. They evaded the question in terms of what US position would be. But imagine 2020 when only one judge would be left on the board, and as of now there are just 4, 3 of them would retire, and with that one judge, so the crisis is not very far. We are just talking of 2 years. Absolutely. So to handle so many cases by one judge requires some pragmatism by the United States.
It's legally not possible.
Exactly, and the effort by the US administration to make it a voluntary rather than mandatory is something which is a big challenge. But let me bring in the resource that we have picked up for this episode of ours, the book that we have in mind. So the book that we have picked up is edited by Abhijit Das, director of the WTO Center here in Delhi, and his colleague James Nedupara. The book focuses on WTO dispute settlement at 20. So how this mechanism has evolved over the years. We would hear from Mr. Rajiv Kher, who has also contributed in the book. What is this dispute settlement system, why it is important for WTO to have, and how it looks like after 20 years of WTO. As I said in the previous round, the challenges are immense. The very survival of WTO is hinging on continuation of the system. So, sir, what are your views on this?
See, the WTO as an institution, as a global institution, has essentially thrived in a sense, based on the role that it has played sorry, in the dispute settlement process. Now today, WTO clearly offers 2 platforms. One is the negotiating platform and the other is the dispute settlement platform. Now dispute settlement platform is coming out of the dispute settlement understanding. Clearly this gives a predictable and a secure, a certain environment to the membership. Yeah. Where they know that if a certain violation takes place, then they can go to this judicial system and seek a redressal. Seek a redressal. Yeah. And that is one of the most important reason why WTO has done so well as a adjudicatory body.
Sreeram, how you look at this danger? We would have to be very quick as time is.
Yeah, you know, it's an egalitarian mechanism where the mighty can also lose and the puny can also win. And that is the system. You know, the book actually brings out the thing that least developed countries have a chance, even though they have not been able to have the capacity to file complaints.
And the book has around 17 chapters. Those who are interested in getting more on WTO's dispute settlement must read this book. With this, thanks to both of you, we come to end of this episode. Please keep us in loop when you are thinking of your comments and ideas. Do communicate with us. Thank you and goodbye.